The Galene Woman talks big life changes. Today is the first day where I've had to close the windows because it's cold outside. And I'm kind of living for it, very much not mad about it. I also just realised, that my t-shirt has makeup on it. So lots of wins today. Hi, I'm Cole, your host for the Galene Woman podcast, keeping your self-care a priority and reminding us all that taking a break from that god-awful essay or that stressy-ass meeting is 100% necessary to keep us all sane. Before we get started, this podcast is clearly all about self-care, and therefore, while you're listening to me talk all about it, I would like you to take this time to do something just for you for the next 30 minutes. Make chai from scratch, reorganize your makeup drawer, do one of those scrubby thingies where you peel everything off your feet, and as a climber I can tell you doing this was a revelatory experience, so you can say that you took time for yourself. So this week's title is perhaps not the most obvious self-care related thing, but when we ran our giveaway, if you partook in that, you will know that we did a questionnaire as a part of the giveaway because we really wanted to kind of connect and engage and understand our audience a little bit more, and boy did we learn. But one of the questions that we actually asked was, what are the main stresses in your life? And one of the things that a lot of people were dealing with right now was big life changes. I mean, there was a good 50% of our responses saying, oh yeah, by the way, going through something really big right now. And I cannot relate to you more, personally, going through one of those experiences right now myself. And although these things are usually kind of external, they're usually a big situation that's just happened to you and that you haven't really had any input on necessarily, it can also be an internal thing. I think that's the thing with big life changes. When I was kind of writing my notes for this episode and I was thinking about what's going to be most relevant to talk about for you and most helpful, it really struck me that it could be anything. I will be honest, it's the internal stuff that scares me the most in terms of, the mental process you have to go through and the emotional process you have to go through, whether it is an internal or external big life change, good or bad. We aren't necessarily talking about scary stuff here. We're just talking about things that have rocked us, the things that have really just changed our life in some way. It doesn't really matter what. The emotions of all of this can be really, really weird. And the thing is, the definition is entirely up to you as to what that thing is in itself. It's such an individual experience, whether it's as kind of obvious as moving school, city, job, or it's something a bit bigger like a breakup or somebody's passed away, or you've had a major fallout with somebody that you're really close to, but then you've also got the side of things like illness, broken limbs, and there's so many things we could be talking about here. So I am going to keep it a little bit more general because of that, but I think coming from the perspective of self-care, this is going to be really important, because the crux of it all for me is whatever it is, literally anything, it throws you off, positively or negatively. It means that your normal stuff, your normal life, your day-to-day experience doesn't just feel normal anymore. There's this added thing, if you're getting married or you're having a baby, or you've just got together in a new relationship, or you bought your first house, or you got a promotion, or you whatever's a big deal for you. I've listed very generic things there, but whatever big deal thing, it doesn't feel like it did before. And not only do you have to figure out this new kind of physical space, potentially, and the new things that are happening around you in a literal sense, but you also need to figure out the kind of mental side of it too, the mental space. And, you know, this is our first time all being people. I would absolutely love to know if somebody has previous experience. And I feel like no matter what advice we're given as well, you know, eventually we've got to figure it out for ourselves, the final decision. We are the judge, you know, we have the, what is it, the hammer and mallet thing they have in a law court? I don't know. We have to make that decision, and I really do think that's where self-care comes in. You know, I always talk about the holistic nature of self-care, and I do think it is fundamental that we all understand that principle. And, you know, the activity, I also talk about the activities that kind of come across with that. And yeah, I do mean showers, pamper evenings, mindful nature walks, yoga classes, when I am talking about self-care in every episode. But I am also quite heavily, I think, talking about an introspection, you know, a reflective time, and parts of your day where you're taking a step back from the picture to admire the bigger picture and understand it in a better way. And I think that bit in our self-care and our understanding as a society as to what self-care is kind of gets lost sometimes. And when we're considering how we look after ourselves and what care as a definition means in our individual lives, you know, we get very focused on the external stuff. Like even when you think about like mindfulness stuff, most of us will think about meditation, which is a physical activity, even though the whole idea is that it's like a mental practice. So I don't know, I think this episode is really important because we're talking about two things here that a lot of us don't want to talk about sometimes. Like a lot of us aren't happy to face up to. Makes us a little scared, makes us a little nervous. And, you know, because we are so focused on the external in this sense, you know, looking inwards is perhaps the hardest thing as a culture, society, group that we have to do. And I 100% get that because as a person myself, I've gone through it, you know, and I still do all the time. I definitely can't sit here and say I have all the answers, but I am 100% willing to find the answers and share them. I think also having any level of self-awareness, or even simply acknowledging that you're aware that something you're doing is wrong, or something that is happening to you is making you feel a certain way, positive or negative, can perhaps be one of the most terrifying experiences as a person. Because it's not natural, you know, as I said before, like we are a culture that focuses on the external stuff. So when you're analysing things that you can't physically see, and it's, you know, all in the meta, shall we say, it can be really off-putting, actually. A very, very uncomfortable space. When I listen to like self-help podcasts and like how to live a better life kind of content, I really think this is the bit that doesn't get highlighted enough. Is it's all well and good sitting down and answering 10 deep questions about your life. You know, we've all done it. We've all considered doing it. But that requires the guts to actually analyse it and analyse who you are as a person. And not a lot of people are comfortable with the idea of acknowledging the bad parts of yourself, because everybody's flawed, you know. And, you know, sometimes we're quite comfortable acknowledging certain flaws. I am a gossip. I always have been. And I think as a yapper and somebody that has a has a podcast, that's perhaps not surprising. But there are other flaws that I'm aware of that I'm much less comfortable acknowledging, you know. And actively saying to yourself, I like this part of me, but this part of me is holding me back. This part of me kind of needs to change, or this new element that's happening in my external world is really going to trigger me and trigger that part of who I am. Oh my Lord, the mental strength and the courage to even have that thought process in itself. It's a lot. It's a really, really big thing. And I think genuinely it's why so many of us won't face up to certain elements of who we are. But it's also why big changes and big life events can so often, even if they are a positive thing, feel really weird and negative and kind of, they don't really you don't really know how to feel about it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's forcing us into that space to acknowledge who we are and acknowledge what's going on. And sometimes that's not necessarily what we want to do. And yeah, it just makes it really grueling. Really grueling. And I think also coming kind of back to the fact that, you know, we want to focus on the external. All those self-care activities I previously listed, they suddenly don't feel right anymore. Or they suddenly won't fit. It's something else. And when I was writing this episode, as I say, there was a lot of things I had to consider. But the following question that I wrote after this bit was, so how do we overcome this? Or simply embrace what is going on. And I think I looked at my screen for about 15 minutes before I realised it's not that I don't have an answer. It's just that the answer that I have right now isn't fully developed. And it isn't something that I think many people would be comfortable explaining unless they're a hell of a lot older or, you know, they've gone through some things. You know, for me, I've had some incredibly positive, big life changes. And I've also had some incredibly negative ones. And each one has forced me to look at my life and the way I behave and the way I think. You know, I had an experience, it's weird because it's like I don't even want to, like, the one that actually comes to mind rather than my dad or, you know, PMDD and anxiety or whatever, like the stuff that we've obviously talked about before, the one that actually comes to mind is an experience that I had with a friend in college. And she was one of these people who had a kind heart and a kind soul, but ultimately was a perfectionist in absolutely everything she did. And very insecure, very unhappy with who she was as a person. And, you know, we were friends for a good 4 or 5 years. And long story short, in our final year of college, some personal stuff happened for both of us. And it meant that we kind of stopped seeing eye to eye. And she got incredibly aggressive with me. And I did not respond well at all. In fact, you know, I think I take a lot of embarrassment. And I feel a lot of shame about the way I treated her and the fact that I wasn't big enough to realise that what she was going through was absolutely the reason why she was behaving the way she was. And it took me a long time to kind of figure that out and to figure out that, you know, in my eyes, I had just lost one of my best friends. You know, that was a big deal for me because everyone took her side and, you know, I was kind of left with only a few friends, a very, very small little group of friends, and, you know, my ex as well. Obviously, we were dating at the time, so my boyfriend, my then boyfriend. And it was so hard. It threw me off in a way I have never, ever had with a friend since, I think. And I think the reason for that is because of the introspection and the time that I took after us kind of falling out to think about what really happened. You know, the ebbs and flows of life will allow you to deal with certain things at certain times. And I don't think it was until about Christmas time of this year that year that this all happened. That I actually sat down with myself and tried to figure it out. So, and it became apparent to me that a big proportion of what went wrong was my behaviour. A big portion of what went wrong was my personal insecurity. And the fact that when I got angry, I got very angry and very vicious, which is not even vaguely okay. And it took me a long time to be okay with that was a part of who I was at that point in my life. You know, I make a very conscious effort now with all of my friends and every person that I meet that I treat everyone with kindness and I treat everyone with a level of respect. And I only do that now because of that experience, because I took that time to think about the way I behaved in that experience. I'm not saying that I was the bad guy. I'm saying that we both played a part in what went wrong. But I think I was the only one that actually took the time to acknowledge that what I did was wrong. And I remember trying to talk to her about it a couple months down the line and being very honest and being like, yeah, I should not have treated you like that. I shouldn't have said that. But you were also horrible to be around and, treated me really unfairly and, all that kind of stuff. And she was not willing to admit it. She was not willing to acknowledge that she'd done that. It was against the values that she clearly thought she had. And that's okay. That's okay, because as I say, not everyone is comfortable or ready or willing to do that kind of stuff. But big life changes like losing your best friend, I really do believe are almost the perfect opportunities to think about why that's happened. And sometimes you will be the victim. Sometimes you really will just be 100% the person that did nothing wrong, and that's also fine. But you also have to acknowledge in that situation, why did you let that happen to yourself? Especially if it's in a friendship situation like the one I've just described. Or, sometimes it's absolutely not even vaguely your fault and there is no role you play. But I think I believe when it comes to acknowledging the mental headspace you're at when you are feeling rocked, feeling lost, feeling a little confused, a bit uncertain about the future, it really does provide you with the space to look at who you are and to look at how you care for yourself. Because I think a big reason why I behaved the way I did was I was absolutely not treating myself with kindness. And how your mental state is playing into your life, if that makes sense. If you can't look at yourself, acknowledge the good and bad, how can you look after yourself? Because if you get triggered by things, or you have a bad temper, or something goes really wrong, or even if something goes really, 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 really right, you want to keep that situation, you still need to be able to say, okay, well, I still do have these elements of who I am. They are neutral things, but they could hold me back. It's like that line of never make a decision when you're in an extreme emotion, when you're angry, when you're really, really sad, when you're super euphorically happy. You have to come back down to earth for a second, and you do have to think about, okay, I've just got the biggest promotion of my life, but I'm still kind of slacking on the time management, or I'm still kind of cutting corners in places I really shouldn't be, or I'm still, a bit of a procrastinator. Embrace it. Acknowledge that is who you are. That's okay. But how can you then, move forward with that? And that process of I need to change this habit, or I need to change this, only happens when you can sit and acknowledge who you are, defining yourself. I was listening to this thing earlier about this reel earlier talking about your future self, the future you, who do you want to be, and all this kind of jazz, and thinking about the habits and the routines you want to have. You can't do any of that. You can't define who you want your best self is if you are not willing to acknowledge who you are now and accept who you are now. You just can't. Screw all these people that tell you that, you can be your best self ever if you do X, Y, and Z. If you do not look at yourself right now and go, yeah, I'm in a bit of a mess right now, and that's okay because XYZ has happened, or, I've let XYZ, kind of take me over or whatever, you will never be able to have the mental strength and the physical strength to move on and change and make the things you want. I think another really big life change that happens is this idea of feeling lost. And I think this is perhaps a nicer transition to another part of what happens when we're kind of considering who we are and how our self-care really feeds into it, how our personal care and our consideration of ourselves builds into our life and who we are. Feeling lost is a feeling that I felt a lot after losing that friend. I felt a lot in my final term at Cambridge. In first year. That was really unspecific. In my first year at Cambridge, my final term. And I actually think I've kind of felt it ever since. We all consume a horrendous amount of content all the time about how we should be living our lives and what we should be doing to get to the next step, especially when you're in your late teens and early 20s. Oh my God, your whole entire 20s. You know, I think it doesn't matter how many times people say your 20s are for fun, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think there will always be that rhetoric that tells you need to get ahead and do X, Y, Z. And I think that kind of contributes to the feeling of being lost. There's a societal expectation that you are supposed to know what you're doing or have some sort of vague plan, you know. And if you don't have a solid plan and you don't have a vague plan and your future is kind of set but not really, and you know, there's so many variations of how you could be feeling lost, but I think it always comes back to that kind of internally, I haven't got a flipping clue what I am doing. And I think sometimes instead of trying to avoid it and instead of making ourselves feel bad that we're not coming out with first class honours, XYZ internship on our back, next job laid out with the most, you know, you're going on to Jane Street Finance, whatever. Instead of just making ourselves feel bad for doing all of that, it's going, hey, I have made it through 100% of every single day of my life thus far. And that is a win. You know, if you're in university, you are making it through university, and that is a win. If you're in your first job, if you're in your 50th job, you have done it, you know, and you're trying to figure out who you are and what that looks like. And the best thing you can do while you're doing that is support yourself, you know, give yourself the mental break from the self-criticism. That is self-care. Telling off your inner critic. I will stand by that forever. We are told what to do, what not to do, how to live, how not to live, what to eat, what to do, what to listen to, what to read, what to buy, what to just consume all the time. We are fed a line of living that if you deviate from, gives you the impression that you're just really mucking up, which is not true. Big life events make us feel lost because it's the first time it's ever happened in our life. It may be something that hundreds of people have gone through, but it's the first time you, with your experiences, with your background, with your feelings and your life, is going through it. And that can be flippin' terrifying. You know, I remember when I got the confirmation that I was going to Cambridge, it was an incredible moment. It was great. I was actually sat on a train up to Edinburgh, lol. And it was just such a rush. And then for about half an hour, I was utterly terrified, you know? And I think that's why all big life changes, in my view, will forever be neutral. Because good stuff always comes with bad, and bad stuff always comes with good. It's just figuring out what that is. And it's giving yourself space to take up. You're allowed to take that space up to navigate what's going through your head at this time. You know, it might take you one long walk thinking about it all to figure it out. It might take you 100. And it doesn't make you slow. It doesn't make you incorrect. It doesn't make you any lesser, because this is your life. And you deserve the time and space and care to live it how you wish. You know, if you just push it down and keep going, if you don't give yourself the mental break or a literal physical break, it's going to become very, very difficult to deal with whatever's going on in your head, and it will come to bite you on your ass. I can trust, like, faith and trust in me on that statement. Like, oh my God, it will come back to you. So don't be afraid. I'm not going to tell you not to be afraid. Be afraid, but keep moving. And sit down on your patio, or your mental patio, on the creaky ass chair that definitely needs repainting, and just think, write, hell, talk aloud about what's happened. What is this big life change? And start to kind of navigate the feelings that are going on inside you. And then with that information, you can kind of take a step back from the page, from the space, and go, okay, I don't necessarily know what to do, but maybe you have a first step. Maybe you know somebody that you can ask for a first step. Maybe something needs to change within inside you. Maybe you have a little bad habit you got to kick, you know? Maybe you've got a personality trait which is letting you down, and that's okay. We've all got them. But if you acknowledge that you do, acknowledge that you've got something worth fighting for, which you absolutely do, taking on that challenge in any way, shape or form, I'm proud of you. That is actually what I want to kind of finish that on. I am proud that you did that. And I'm proud that even if you don't have any more answers and you don't have any more steps, that you at least know what's going on and you took strength in yourself to figure that out. And I think that is actually quite a nice ending note. I hope you have had a reflective 25-30 minutes listening to me. And I hope that you do at least feel encouraged. I am fully encouraging you to sit with yourself and breathe through whatever is going. And I mean that positively, or if it's a negative situation, you know, through support and care and love. It's there. It's here in your life. You know, I'm providing it for you. Your friends are, maybe your mum, maybe your dad, maybe your siblings, whoever, they are providing you with love. I can guarantee it. And hopefully, when you go through a big life change, you have an inkling of what to do, or at least where to start. And you will surprise yourself. You really will surprise yourself on what you can do. Of course, there are always lots of resources and little tidbits of information that might just help you and guide you through on the Galene Company website. Please check it out if you want to, and if you need a little bit more, connect with us on social media. If you have a question about anything I've just said, either put it in our comments or connect with us on social media at Galene Company _ 90% of the time. I think we're at the Galene Woman on TikTok. But yeah, big life changes, man, are scary, but there are plenty of people who are willing to sit and have a yap and figure this out. Until next time, my darling, please take care of yourself, take care of each other. I will see you soon.